Welcome, Shadow Seekers, to American Shadows, Crimes and Chronicles. Today, we're unearthing a tale that'll haunt your thoughts long after it ends. Whether you're glued to the screen or just listening in, you're in for a wild ride through history's darkest corners. If you're new, hit subscribe to join our mission of exposing America's hidden truths. Regulars, your likes fuel our journey into the unknown. Now, let's peel back the layers of time and reveal the secrets beneath. Ready? Let's begin. 150 dead in 4 hours. The brutal attack that changed the Civil War. Hello friends, you're watching American Shadows, where we uncover the darkest chapters of American history. Today we're delving into one of the bloodiest and most brutal events of the Civil War era, the Lawrence Massacre of August 21st, 1863. This isn't just a tale of violence. It's a story that encapsulates the complex, bitter divisions tearing America apart during its bloodiest conflict. What transforms a quiet frontier town into a killing field? How does neighborly disagreement escalate into mass murder? And why, over 150 years later, does the Lawrence Massacre still resonate as a stark reminder of the horrors of guerrilla warfare? Before we unravel this tragic tale of violence and retribution, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to all of you who support our work. Your engagement fuels our passion for bringing these shadowy corners of history to light. As we explore this complex story, we'd love to hear from you. Have you encountered local histories of Civil War violence in your area? How do you think events like the Lawrence Massacre shaped the course of the war and its aftermath? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspectives add invaluable depth to these narratives. To understand the horror of what happened that day, we must first step back and look at the volatile situation that had been brewing for years. The Kansas-Missouri border was a tinderbox ignited by the fierce ideological conflict between pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions. This region had been known as Bleeding Kansas even before the Civil War officially began, a place where the lines between Union and Confederate sympathies were deeply drawn. Lawrence, Kansas, had become a symbol of defiance to the Confederacy. It was here that abolitionists and Free State supporters gathered, making the town a target for those who believed slavery was not just a right, but a necessity. At the center of this maelstrom stood William Quantrill, the man who would lead the brutal raid on Lawrence. Quantrill was a complex and controversial figure. Born in Ohio, he moved to Kansas in 1857, initially siding with anti-slavery forces. But Quantrill was a man driven more by opportunity than ideology. He soon switched sides, becoming a Confederate sympathizer and eventually one of the most feared guerrilla leaders of the war. His transformation from schoolteacher to ruthless raider speaks volumes about the Civil War's ability to radicalize ordinary people. Quantrill's tactics were brutal but effective, earning him a fearsome reputation and the loyalty of equally ruthless men like Bloody Bill Anderson and Frank James, later of the infamous James Younger Gang. In the pre-dawn darkness of August 21st, 1863, Quantrill led about 450 men into Lawrence, their horses' hooves muffled by the stillness of the hour. The town was asleep, unaware of the storm that was about to descend upon it. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, the raiders unleashed hell. Quantrill's men went door to door, dragging men and boys from their beds and into the streets. They spared no one. Fathers, sons, husbands, all were targets. Some were shot where they stood. Others were forced to kneel before their executioners. The brutality of the killings was matched only by the cold efficiency with which they were carried out. One of the first victims was Reverend Snyder, dragged from his home and shot in front of his family. "My God, if you're going to kill me, let me pray first," he pleaded. His killers showed no mercy. The Eldridge House Hotel became a scene of particular brutality. Men were rounded up, marched outside, and executed en masse. One survivor later recalled, "The air was filled with smoke and cries, and the streets were literally running with blood." The town's mayor, George Collimore, hid in his well to escape the violence. In a cruel twist of fate, he suffocated before he could be rescued. Senator James Lane, a prime target for the raiders, managed to escape by running through a cornfield in his nightshirt, a scene that would have been comical if not for the tragic context. Within hours, over 150 men and boys were dead, and the streets of Lawrence ran red with their blood. But the raiders weren't satisfied with just killing. They wanted to erase Lawrence from existence. They set fire to homes, businesses, schools, anything that would burn. By the time they rode out of town, Lawrence was little more than a smoldering ruin, a testament to the depths of human cruelty. The aftermath of the massacre was devastating. The survivors, mostly women and children, were left to sift through the ashes of their once thriving town. One woman, searching for her husband, described the scene. "The dead were everywhere. It was a sight I hope never to see again." Quantrill claimed the raid was retaliation for a collapsed prison in Kansas City that had killed several female relatives of guerrilla fighters. But many historians argue the scale and brutality of the attack went far beyond simple retaliation. It was an act of terror designed to demoralize Union supporters and disrupt Union control of the border region. The Lawrence Massacre sent shockwaves throughout the Union. Harper's Weekly declared it the most atrocious and barbarous massacre that has occurred since the commencement of the war. In its aftermath, Union forces issued General Order No. 11, forcibly evacuating 4 counties in Missouri. This scorched-earth policy turned thousands of civilians into refugees, further inflaming tensions in the region. The massacre had far-reaching strategic consequences for the Civil War in the Western Theater. Union forces, realizing the threat posed by guerrilla warfare, diverted significant resources to combating irregular forces. This shift in focus arguably weakened the Union's ability to engage Confederate armies directly, prolonging the conflict in the region. Moreover, the massacre crystallized Northern resolve. The brutality displayed in Lawrence became a rallying cry for the Union cause, much like "Remember the Alamo" had been a generation earlier. It hardened attitudes towards the Confederacy and likely contributed to the increasingly harsh tactics employed by Union forces as the war progressed. The event highlights the brutal nature of the conflict in the border states, where the line between civilian and combatant often blurred. It wasn't just armies facing off on battlefields, it was neighbor against neighbor, with deep-seated grudges fueling the violence. The legacy of the Lawrence Massacre extends far beyond the Civil War era. Today, the city of Lawrence remembers this tragic event through various memorials and annual commemorations. The Lawrence Massacre Memorial, erected in 1895, stands in Oak Hill Cemetery, bearing the names of the men and boys killed that day. Each year on August 21st, the city holds a remembrance ceremony, bringing together descendants of survivors and victims alike. These events serve not only to honor the dead, but also to reflect on the lessons of history and the importance of reconciliation. The massacre has also left its mark on popular culture. It has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and even featured in films and television shows about the Civil War era. This continued presence in the public consciousness underscores the event's enduring impact on American memory and identity. As we reflect on the Lawrence Massacre, we're confronted with uncomfortable questions. How thin is the veneer of civilization in times of conflict? How do communities recover from such traumatic events? And what lessons can we draw from this dark chapter of our history? The story of the Lawrence Massacre forces us to confront the reality that war, especially civil war, often brings out the worst in humanity. It challenges us to consider how easily neighbor can turn against neighbor when fueled by ideology and hatred. This is American Shadows, where we peer into the darker corners of our nation's past. Until next time, remember that understanding our history, even its most brutal chapters, is crucial to shaping a better future. The echoes of Lawrence continue to resonate today, reminding us of the high cost of division and the importance of vigilance against hatred and violence. As we go about our daily lives, let's take a moment to appreciate the peace we often take for granted. The story of Lawrence reminds us that this peace is fragile and must be actively maintained through understanding, empathy, and a commitment to justice for all. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep watching American Shadows. In the pursuit of truth, every story matters, no matter how painful.